woman's body was found beaten, strangled and burned on Staten Island, New York's East Shore in 1991. It was a passerby that found the victim's body in the weeds off a South Beach road just after dawn on September 20th, 1991. She was found face up, handcuffed, partially clothed and burnt in a vacant lot. She had 17 blows to her head, and a hammer was recovered at the scene. Investigators believe the hammer was used to commit the crime. On the woman's body, authorities also found a black dress, 2 gold chains, a ring watch, 30 cents, and a pack of Newport cigarettes. Police were initially unable to identify the perpetrator or the victim, leaving the case unsolved. An individual with the name Lloyd L. was identified, but that was as far as it got. There was no other indication that he was involved. He could not be prosecuted or exonerated at that time. Given the circumstances, the victim became known as the girl with the scorpion tattoo for decades, referring to a distinctive scorpion tattoo found on her body. In 2008, the District Attorney's Office revisited the case and submitted her DNA and her dental records to the FBI, but that did not result in any new leads. The case was revisited again in 2019 when Staten Island District Attorney Michael McMahon decided to use forensic genealogy technology in a joint effort with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, New York Police Department, and New York Medical Examiner Office. In March 2023, at a press conference, Michael McMahon announced that the victim had been identified as 30-year-old Christine Belusco. Christine was placed for adoption when she was an infant and was raised by a New Jersey couple. She lived in Clifton and worked for a clothing store. After she found out she was adopted, she left home in 1991 and briefly stayed at the Mount Airy Lodge in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. She had a 2-year-old daughter named Krista Nicole. Christine and Krista were both last seen at the resort in September 1991. None of Christine's family members knew she had lost her life. They assumed she was safely living in Florida. Michael McMahon said, "We have already notified Christine's family of her tragic end, and we continue to make all efforts to also locate Krista Nicole so we can let her know about who her mother was and what has been done to bring justice to this case." Despite the incredibly dedicated work of the New York Police Department at that time, authorities were unable to identify her or locate the person who took her life so savagely and viciously at such a young age. Nearly 30 years later, in a joint effort with the FBI and New York Police Department, detectives picked up the case and employed the use of forensic genealogy technology, which was unavailable in 1991, but invaluable in today's law enforcement world, to bring closure to the victim's family. While the investigation into the case is ongoing, Michael McMahon said investigators believe the perpetrator was known to Christine. There is absolutely no indication that this was done by anyone other than someone who knew her, given the facts of the case and what transpired in the way that her life was ended. That certainly makes us think that this was someone who knew her. "It is an intimate type of slaying," McMahon said. An age progression photo of Krista Nicole was released and the search for her whereabouts continues. There is currently no known information on who Krista's father is. If you recognize Krista Nicole or know anything about the slaying of Christine Belusco, call the Richmond County District Attorney's Office. In 1993, Jennifer Renee Odum was a 12-year-old 7th grader at Wesley Chapel, Florida's Thomas E. Waitman Middle School. She was a competitive barefoot water skier who placed highly in competitions, and she played clarinet in the school band. She was usually the skier who glided above the water, reaching the summit of the human pyramid. She was born on August 25, 1980. She was Renee Converse's oldest daughter and Clark Converse's stepdaughter. She was the granddaughter of Jim and Margie Denny, and she had a sister named Jessica Ann Odum, who was 9 years old. Their home was in St. Joseph, a little town close to Dade City, Florida. The rabbit owned by Jennifer and Jessica was named Beanie. Jennifer also had a deep affection for her Springer Spaniel named Gypsy. On the family's 15 acres, the two sisters constructed forts, went four-wheeling, and swam in the creek behind their home during the summer. On Friday, February 19, 1993, which was a cold morning, Jennifer Odum dressed for school by putting on her white turtleneck and white jeans. She wore her grandmother's red cashmere sweater over her shoulder-length chestnut hair. She had spent a lot of time outside, which is why she was tan and skinny. She and her mother got into the car that same morning after she had put on her black boots. In order to wait for the school bus near their mailbox, the two drove 200 yards up the narrow lime rock driveway. Before Renee Converse, who was riding a shotgun, turned left to go to work, Jennifer got onto her school bus and settled into her usual spot in the back seat, where she and her mother could see each other. After school hours, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jennifer got off her school bus, said goodbye to her friends, and began the 200 yards walk home. When Jennifer's sister got home from school at around 4 p.m., their house was locked and she couldn't get inside. After waiting for a while, she informed their mother over the phone that her older sister had not returned home. That's when Converse realized Jennifer probably hadn't made it home. Michelle, Jennifer's closest friend, told her that she had witnessed Jennifer get off the bus and start walking home. Jennifer's mother called the police because she knew something was seriously wrong. In a matter of hours, deputies began a thorough search. About 400 volunteers joined a search party to assist in combing through an area of about 60 square miles known as Countryside. Volunteers, neighbors, family, and friends looked for Jennifer. The small Pasco County town of Dade City was surrounded by rolling pastures, woods, and groves that could be thoroughly searched by law enforcement using police dogs. Some of her classmates had seen a blue truck in the area, and it was the focus of every law enforcement agency in the Bay Area. The school bus children who accompanied Jennifer recalled seeing an older light blue pickup truck of an unidentified make and model slowly following her down the road in the direction that she was walking. The kids said it had a trailer hitch with pipes or a ladder in the back and a silver-painted rear bumper instead of a chrome one. The kids described the driver as a white man in his 40s with brown hair that reached his shoulders. Search teams concentrated on the blue truck because they thought the driver might have been connected to Jennifer's disappearance. The FBI, Nando Police Department, and Pasco County Sheriff's Office personnel worked from a dock-in boathouse to locate the truck as a last resort, while divers combed Lake Jovita for the same truck. On Thursday, February 25, 6 days after Jennifer disappeared, a man and a woman going through an abandoned orange grove, roughly 10 miles north of Jennifer's school bus stop, discovered her severely decomposed nude body. Her body was discovered in the orange grove, close to a horse trail off Powell Road, south of Brooksville, surrounded by a stand of pine trees. She had been brutally attacked and had suffered a head injury from blunt force trauma. According to the detective, she most likely died there in the woods not long after going missing. Neither the blue truck nor its driver could be located. Jennifer's clothes couldn't be found either. On Monday, March 1, 1993, country music icon Vince Gill was scheduled to perform at the local Strawberry Festival. This was while Jennifer's family was still busy organizing her funeral. According to Clark Converse, Jennifer's stepfather, the girls had been anticipating Gill's performance for weeks, hoping to get him to sign pictures. Clark Converse and Jessica attended the festival prior to the concert in order to grant Jennifer's request that Gill sign a picture that she and her sister had taken of themselves with the singer earlier that year. Vice President Joe Newsom gave Gill, who was having dinner, the 3 photos in between the festival performances. Gill was asked by Jessica's stepfather to sign 3 copies, one for Jennifer, one for Jessica, and one for both girls. Newsom later remarked in an interview, "I told Gil this young lady had been killed and her dad was outside." In response, Gil said he was aware of the incident and that he also had a small daughter. He signed the pictures, writing "May God be with you" on the one for Jennifer. Gil went to the second show of the evening. He gave a brief speech to honor Jennifer to the audience before the final song. His voice cracked while he said, "I'm going to try to get through this the best I can." His Grammy-winning song, "I Still Believe in You," was performed by Gil and dedicated to Jennifer, who was sadly taken from this world too soon. Gil asked the audience to assist him in finishing the song as tears streamed down his face. Almost 15,000 people raised their voices. Jeff Moore, a radio personality, stood backstage and observed the thousands of faces covered in tears. "It was extremely painful," he remarked later. Regretfully, her case remained unresolved because no one in the community was able to provide investigators with pertinent information. On January 16, 1992, a 17-year-old girl was abducted in north-central Pasco County as she got off a school bus 13 months prior to Jennifer's kidnapping. She had been viciously beaten, assaulted, and found in a pool of blood behind an abandoned house. Investigators said she had very serious injuries to her skull and head. She lived, but her left side paralysis left her permanently altered. She was a real victim who had previously been on the honor roll and participated in track and field. She didn't lead a dangerous lifestyle. At the time, DNA could be obtained from the crime scene by law enforcement. Detectives thought there might be a connection between the cases because of the similarities between Jennifer's and the unidentified girl's experiences. The two victims were adolescent girls in Pasco County who were kidnapped after getting off the school bus, brought to a distant field, beaten, and left there in the hope that they would die from their wounds. Jennifer's body was discovered a mere few miles away from the location of the other victim. 16 months after the incident, the police called psychic Nancy Mayer to help them track down the person who caused the incident after they ran into several dead ends. For many years, Pennsylvania-born psychic Nancy Mayer has collaborated with law enforcement agencies across the nation. Nancy claimed to have consulted on over 300 criminal investigations and to have provided crucial leads over 80% of the time. Nancy thought that Jennifer's death was carried out by two men. She said one of them might be a smoker with a strong cough. She also characterized them as white muscular mechanics. The photos taken at the crime scene were under seal. Nancy Mayer was thus prohibited from viewing it. In spite of this, she could clearly picture two men. She was brought to the location where Jennifer's corpse was discovered. Nancy mentioned that there were items in the neighborhood that had not yet been found. She was able to provide details about a number of Jennifer's still missing belongings, such as her cousin's clarinet case, bearing the initials LO. She persisted in providing details about the offenders in the hopes of cracking the case. Nancy Mayer was very accurate about certain things, according to Hernando County Sheriff's Office Detective Carlos Douglas. This accuracy caused the investigators to look in previously unconsidered areas. She provided a wealth of information to the detectives. On a national television program called Unsolved Mysteries, Jennifer's unresolved case was featured on December 2, 1994. The Hernando County Sheriff's Office received over 50 phone tips and additional investigative leads via mail after the show aired from all over the nation. According to a Sheriff's Office spokesman, the program accomplished their goals. It increased the case's exposure. Major Gary Zorn Smith, a former Hernando County sheriff who oversaw the investigation in its early stages, claimed that the investigators were at a loss for words despite the new revelation. He stated that there was a good chance the crime would go unsolved and, even in the event that it was, it might take another crime to solve it. Jennifer's missing book, bag, and clarinet case were found by a couple searching for scrap metal in a rural Hernando County on Thursday, January 5, 1995, about 2 years after her body was discovered. It was discovered a few miles away from where her body was found. The person thought to be responsible for her murder had fingerprints on her clarinet case and backpack that the police were able to collect. Sadly, there was never a match for a suspect with these fingerprints in the database. The Tampa Bay area was plagued by the case, which attracted national attention over time. Tipping was rewarded with money in the thousands. Jennifer's family awaited words as detectives spent tens of thousands of hours following leads. As the years grew into decades, Renee Converse, Jennifer's mother, questioned if it was someone Jennifer knew. Jennifer's stepfather, Clark Converse, stated that there was a good possibility the perpetrator was someone the family knew. As each year goes by without any resolution, Converse claims to cry a little bit more. The reality is that Jennifer is gone and will never be in our lives again. Nothing is going to change that, she said. Additionally, according to Converse, the family is appreciative of what they do know. That we have this much closure is a blessing. We know where she is, so we're not searching for her. It's going to be a very bittersweet ending, she said. Converse could still see her slender, sun-kissed 12-year-old daughter waving farewell from the back window of the Pasco County school bus. She would never again get to see her firstborn daughter, who had brown eyes. "I love you," was the last thing Converse remembers the two saying to each other. The couple claimed to have exhausted all avenues of collaboration in the hunt for Jennifer's killer. In order to prevent any more tragedies, they wanted the person found. The St. Petersburg Times announced on Monday, February 19, 2007, that it had been 14 years since Jennifer was kidnapped and her murder was unsolved. During the same year, Hernando County Crime Stoppers members gave special playing cards with a hotline number and a brief description of an unsolved case from around the state to inmates at the Hernando County Detention Center. Jennifer had 2 color photos on her Queen of Diamonds card. The Hernando Sheriff's Office has a web page featuring images and details about Jennifer. Additionally, a slideshow featuring Jennifer's pictures is assembled. George Lloydgren, a detective from Hernando County, later led the cold case division. Along with some unsettling theory, he had access to the newest DNA technology. "I believe that there is probably one person, if not more, that would know who is responsible for this," he stated. Additionally, he thought that the person might be an ex-spouse or family member who is either afraid to come forward or is protecting the offender. "I think the reason people do not want to get involved is they may not want to sit there and have to testify against that individual." Investigators believed there were multiple people out there with more information, and they wanted them to come forward after receiving a few anonymous tips over the years. They experimented with a number of strategies to get fresh leads, including billboards, a $20,000 reward, and a national TV documentary. Over time, investigators gathered approximately 1,000 pieces of evidence, received thousands of tips, and conducted hundreds of interviews in an effort to identify Jennifer's killer. The sheriff's office was contacted by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which offered to scan all of the case files for Jennifer so they would be easily accessible. Over 75,000 pieces of paper were involved. There were hints found throughout every investigation, such as the fingerprints found on Jennifer's backpack and clarinet case. Suspects were also present. Frank Daniel Potts, a serial offender, was one potential suspect. In 1993, he sexually assaulted a 10-year-old girl in Lakeland. He had a blue pickup truck that he had allegedly dismantled, and he was employed at a construction site in Pasco County at the time of the killing. The authorities were unable to connect him to the case of Jennifer, but Walter Ducharme, who was residing in the neighborhood at the time of the murder, was also a potential suspect. According to his ex-wife, he could be the offender. Her testimony was contradictory though. He was not indicted when the case against him was brought before a grand jury. It was no longer thought that he was connected to the case. Detective George Lloydgren received a call from Pasco County Sheriff Chris Naco in February 2015. He said the case of the teenage girl found alive in 1992 had a good lead thanks to new technology. Investigators thought the case was connected to Jennifer's. Naco stated that there was a 1 in 7.7 nonillion chance of discovering another match. As with any of the previous cases, Lloydgren remarked, "I believe DNA will play a significant role in Jennifer's case because artifacts were gathered. The advancement of technology is relatively recent. Before February 2015, the biological evidence uncovered during the 1992 case investigation was tested, and investigators obtained a complete DNA profile. By comparing male DNA left at the scene with that of family members, investigators can identify a suspect through a DNA technique called familial searching. A standard DNA search's drawback is that it requires the offender database to have a suspect's genetic fingerprint on file in order for law enforcement to match. In order to determine whether any close matches between the DNA and local DNA might be family members, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement compared the samples. A jailed Jeffrey Norman Crum was identified by the sheriff as the person whose DNA was found to match. DNA samples from Crum's father, grandfather, and brother were acquired by investigators. There was a clear match between the DNA found on the victim and Crum's father's DNA. Investigators came to the conclusion that Jeffrey Crum grabbed the girl from the 1992 case by the arm, led her around the side of the abandoned house, and struck her head very forcefully with a blunt object. She lost a portion of her brain and part of her skull, which left her partially paralyzed. After that, Jeffrey Crum, who was 53 at the time, was eventually taken into custody in relation to the 1992 case. Authorities claimed that Crum became a person of interest in this case because of his arrest. The detective in charge of Jennifer's case said that when Crum was linked to the 1992 case, he nearly immediately rose to the top of the suspect list in Jennifer's case due to the similarities, which revived the investigation. He added that although there had been suspects over the years, Crum was not on the list. Marking the 25th anniversary of her death, Jennifer's mother told The Times in 2018 that she and other family members tried to have faith that her daughter's case would eventually be solved. Crum's 1992 crime left his victim partially paralyzed, and he was sentenced to life in prison. During the sentencing hearing, the victim's aunt testified in court and described the harm he had caused that would last a lifetime. Her aunt said that day was the end of her life. She brought up Jennifer as well. A year later, a young lady, Jennifer Odum, was killed, she continued, and that brought back so many different things that today the perpetrator still has not been caught. Detective Lloydgren gained new resolve after Crum's arrest and sentencing, and Jennifer's family felt hopeful that the culprit would be apprehended. Following that, detectives launched a thorough investigation and spent the next few years speaking with everyone they could locate. They might have been connected to Crum at the time of Jennifer's abduction. The state attorney received this information, and a grand jury was given the facts and circumstances. A month before Jennifer would have turned 43 on July 27, 2023, authorities declared that they had made an arrest in the case and that the prosecution intended to seek the death penalty for the defendant. Bill Glass, the state attorney, announced the news at a press conference. This occurred shortly after the Hernando County Sheriff's Office declared that 61-year-old Jeffrey Norman Crum has been charged with Jennifer's kidnapping, assault, and death. After spending years looking into Jennifer's case, Detective George Lloydgren said that shock is probably the best word to describe how Jennifer's family responded when he informed them about the arrest. He claimed that he acted swiftly to avoid becoming emotional. They had a lot to process, and he anticipates that it will take some time for it to fully register. The sheriffs claim that every credible lead for the previous 30 years, whether from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, or private citizens, has been thoroughly investigated. This investigation has involved countless detectives, sworn law enforcement officers, civilians, and tipsters. More victims are being sought after by investigators. Authorities worry that Crum might be involved in more offenses. A 1993 photo of him was made public, along with a request for anyone who knew him in the 1980s and 1990s to get in touch with the sheriff's office. We urge anyone who had interactions with this individual to come forward with information on other crimes he may have committed, and/or may have themselves been a victim of Jeffrey Crum, to reach out to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office and speak to our cold case unit. Authorities maintain a tight lid on details, but they did reveal that in 1992, Crum lived on Somerset Lane in Spring Hill, the Pasco County region, where Jennifer was kidnapped, and he worked as a drywall installer in the construction industry. His home was roughly 12 miles from Jennifer's body discovery location and 21 miles from the location where she was last seen. He drove a blue truck at the time, according to officials. The case's lead detective repeatedly stated during a news conference on Thursday, July 27, 2023, that Crum had not been on the investigators' radar until recently. According to records, Crum has a long history of convictions for violent crimes. The sheriff said that Crum had been taken into custody for armed robbery in Hillsborough County in 1985. In Hillsborough County, he was accused of kidnapping, assault, and false imprisonment. In 1987, he was taken into custody by Tampa police for carrying a concealed weapon. When he was discovered carrying a concealed weapon once more in 1988, he was accused of aggravated assault. He was taken into custody 3 times in Hernando County in 1998 on charges of domestic abuse. He was arrested in Hillsborough County in 2001 for violating his probation. A few years later, he was taken into custody in Hernando County on charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. He was detained in Pasco County in 2015 on suspicion of aggravated assault against a child under the age of 12. According to the detective, he was a violent person who liked to do bad things. For the assault and kidnapping case out of Pasco County that was prosecuted around 2015, Crum is already serving 2 life sentences. At present, he is housed in the Hernando County Jail. Judge Kurt assigned a public defender to represent him and directed that he be held without bond. Following the kidnapping and murder of Jennifer Odum, residents of Pasco and Hernando counties were on edge. When the news of the arrest broke, they talked about their feelings and thoughts. The general manager of Brooksville's Papa Joe's Italian restaurant, Jeannie Cameron, said that she and other residents recall hearing about her disappearance all too well. Joseph Gioratan, the owner of Papa Joe's Italian restaurant, stated, "Back then, 30 years ago as a parent, I was very angry that someone could do something like that to a child, and then leave her there in the middle of nowhere." Jessica Ellis claimed to have attended Waitman Middle School with Jennifer, and to have participated in band class together in the clarinet section. "I would say we saw each other a lot. We weren't like close friends, but we knew a lot of the same people. We rode the school bus every day, and I just remember her always being nice with me and everyone else that rode her school bus." In the days, months, and years that followed Jennifer's death, there was fear and grief. For many people in the community, Jeffrey Norman Crum's arrest provides closure. On June 21, 2021, a groundskeeper, while clearing ground cover, discovered a human body close to a trail on the southeast side of Metzen Lake in Golden State Park, San Francisco, California. The white male was lying on a blanket and sleeping bag, surrounded by trash and miscellaneous items. The man was wearing a tank top, dark jeans, underwear and leggings. A small partial can of chewing tobacco was located in his rear pants pocket. During the autopsy, the San Francisco chief medical examiner estimated the man to be about 45 years old. There was no evidence of trauma on the body. Based on the condition of the body, authorities estimated that the man passed away 2 weeks before he was found. When detectives were unable to identify the man who became known as the Medicine Lake John Doe, and the case seemingly going cold, they reached out to the DNA Doe Project for help. The DNA Doe Project is a non-profit investigative genealogy research outfit that says on its website that it has become a go-to organization for law enforcement agencies and medical examiners across North America, helping them solve their most intractable cases. Right away, the DNA Doe Project team had an important clue. There was a match in the range of a first cousin that was on the John Doe's maternal side. From this, the team was able to identify the specific branch of the John Doe's family tree and determined he was one of 6 children. Only 2 of the siblings were male, and a proof of life study ruled out one of the brothers. This meant that in March 2023, the John Doe was positively identified as Kurt Jerome Aiken. After the identification was made, people came forward to shed light on Kurt's life. He was a homeless man living in Golden Gate Park. Like many people experiencing homelessness, Kurt was disconnected from his family. He carried no identification, and no one came to claim his remains. Area residents knew him to be a local terror. One person stated that Kurt was friendly in the past, but developed some sort of hatred towards dogs, and was known to verbally and physically attack people, especially women walking their dogs in the area. A dog walker in the park named Renee said in an interview, "He escalated to charging us on the trails and kicking the dogs. She even shot video of him jumping out of the bushes, armed and threatening to end her and her dog's lives." She also mentioned an incident in which he threw a rock through the window of her van, shattering it and shattering the animals in glass. He was allegedly arrested in 2019 for throwing coffee on a woman, her dog and her stroller. "I am one of about a dozen women with dogs that he's attacked over the years. I was not a fan of the man," Renee said. It's still unknown what caused the demise of Kurt Jerome Aiken. Investigators didn't detect any foul play. Many are of the opinion that he died from natural causes.